Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Syndico virtual roundtable discussion. Today we are going to discuss why aren't drones everywhere. We have assembled a panel of experts from across the drone industry. Obviously, you've got myself, Andrew Bird. I work for Syndico as the DJI Enterprise brand manager and manage everything to do with that. And then also, of course, we've got a number of key guests here. So, guys, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Graham, to start off.
Yeah, yes, hi everybody. Graham Brown from ARPAS UK. We are the UK Drone Trade Association looking after all things drone.
Thanks very much, Graham. And Sergey?
Yes, I'm Sergey from DJI Enterprise, and I'm helping public safety entities and enterprise customers in Europe to start and develop their drone program.
Great stuff, thank you. And Rebecca?
Hi everybody, my name's Rebecca Jones, CEO and co-founder of iPreserve, national services provider and recognised assessment entity training provider.
Thanks, Rebecca. And finally, Burhan?
Hi everybody, I'm Burhan. I work at Syndico with Andy. I work in the technical department. Me and Andy work very closely together.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks very much. So, guys, we will have a live Q&A at the end of the discussion. We'll also be emailing out a Q&A to all of the attendees as well. I suppose, firstly, with this, for those that aren't fully au fait with drones and the drone industry, I suppose the first question is what is a drone? So I don't know who would like to kick off with that. Sergey, maybe?
Yeah, sure. A drone, or also known as an unmanned air vehicle, also in the industry, is usually a flying object which helps our customers to see the world from above, and this is how all the journey started in the early days, like a decade ago, where we saw first customers using DJI drones back then with a action camera attached to it, fly it from above, see the world from another perspective, and from there we saw also the world, and especially the enterprise world, seeing the benefits of those flying objects and how they could be utilized for various tasks in the different industries.
Good stuff. Thank you, Sergey. Rebecca, do you want to give what is a drone?
Everybody's interpretation of a drone is differently. So I see a drone as something, a camera or data gathering device that enables my clients to obtain data more effectively from inaccessible areas.
Good stuff. And Graham?
Yeah, as Rebecca says, I mean, there's lots of different views, but the main thing for me is they're devices that can be used to avoid people having to work at height in dangerous areas, in confined spaces. They collect data. There's multi-rotor, things like a helicopter but with multiple blades, or fixed wing that can travel further. There's a lot of variety and a lot of uses, we haven't even thought of yet.
For sure, I agree. Certainly with these, people may have heard of the terminology of UAV or unmanned aerial vehicle, with those kind of things. But certainly there's a multitude of uses which many people know, but as Graham says there, I think moving forward there are things that we don't even know that they're going to be useful in the future. I suppose like to sort of kick things off with it, what's from an enterprise perspective, which are the drones that are used for commercial use, what would you say is the benefit of using enterprise drones? Burhan, do you want to give a bit of input?
Yes, I'm actually a qualified pilot myself, and I've gone out and done a few jobs myself. And a lot of these are being roof inspections. And I would say the fact that I can carry out a roof inspection without having to use any sort of like scaffolding or putting myself at risk is just a huge plus. And it makes life a lot easier, and it's very quick to gather all that data. It's less than an hour. So it makes everything so efficient.
In terms of that side of things, certainly from a roofing perspective with this, it certainly removes a huge amount of risk as well, doesn't it? Because you don't have to work at height. I know, Rebecca, from your side, you're working with businesses, helping them to integrate drones into their operation. Like, what would you see the sort of benefit of using Enterprise Kit and drones is to businesses these days?
I think it's a multifaceted benefit to any organisation looking to integrate drones into their workflow. We look at the immediate one is from a safety point of view, health and safety, especially in inaccessible areas. We talk about roof inspections, but equally as an operating company or drone services provider, we do a lot of unsafe structures following major events such as fire, floods, etc. I think it's also then playing into from an efficiency point of view. One of the things that we say to our clients or we promote actively within our customer base is about sharing that data. So depending on what expertise is looking at that data depends on the decision making process. So it can make an organisation far more efficient. You've got the innovation aspect of it in terms of future-proofing their business, looking at different ways to do things. Looking at traditional methods, how did that typically you'd get data, and now looking at technology, it's fairly accessible, and also looking at competition as well, in terms of where they take their business, what are competitors doing, and the benefit that brings to their organisation over their competitors. So I think there's a multi-approach in terms of the benefits that drones can bring to an organisation, but I think it's efficiency, it's cost effective, and it also reduces that health and safety. But equally, if we look at the efficiency aspect of that, we then play into sustainability. So, for example, with our customers, multiple different stakeholders would typically visit a site, will make a decision, whereas actually what they're doing is utilising drone data, which is making the whole supply chain and their whole workforce more efficient by making decisions.
Some really, really good points with that. I think that the three things that I kind of push, or not even push, but if you were to sit there and say, what were the three things that a business can kind of benefit from with using drones, and it's saving money, saving time, and reducing risk. And those are I think every single business out there can certainly benefit from that. But from your side, Sergey, what do you think in terms of like the uses of enterprise drones? Like what are the kind of usage cases that are out there currently?
Well, that's a good question. We have seen at the beginning, like 5-6 years ago, when the first enterprise customers started adopting drone technology, they saw the drone basically just as a flying camera. And gradually through the years, but also with our help, DJI introducing new products with different payloads. We saw the enterprise customers adopting those new technologies and those new payloads to gather more and more data, and more importantly, other kind of data. So nowadays we also have pretty accessible drones with thermal cameras, with multispectral cameras, with lidars, which was not possible like 5-6 years ago, or the cost was so high that it was not efficient for those businesses, as Rebecca mentioned, to start using drones. And these days it's completely different, and the world is already in a stage where they saw the benefits of using drones and drone technology and how they will adopt it in their industry, maybe in the electricity, energy, could be also public safety, inspection of roofs, solar, all kind of stuff, but also helping those organizations who are trying to save the nature, the environment, also use that technology to benefit for the whole of the society.
Yeah, I think it's so difficult when people say, like, what are the use cases for drones? Because I think, like you say there, that initially it was more videography, like the film industry, and they were big users of the equipment. And then gradually it's kind of evolved, and I think we're still kind of in the early stages within the market of people understanding the capabilities of these things, like what a drone can give you when you're doing a survey and 2D 3D aerial mapping, what kind of thermal imaging that you can get from these things, the benefits that it can provide to the public safety sector with that. And again, they're being used a lot more, but there's still a long way to go on that side of things. And I suppose, Graham, you've obviously been working with that side for quite a long time now. Like, what's in terms of the uses and the kind of drone adoption and so on, how have you seen things evolve over the past few years?
Well, I think firstly that there is more being done with drones. I think we're still at the start of understanding the financial benefits. I mean, I quote a couple of examples where, one organization had been told they needed a completely new roof on one of their properties. We put the drone up as a demo, and they decided following that, a 20-minute flight, that actually it needed a £60,000 repair. So the saving was quite massive, within 20. Now that doesn't always happen, but the rough rule of thumb is if you're inspecting a high-rise building, compared with what you might have to do with MUPS and power lift hire and what have you, the savings can be 70+%. 70, not 17. So it is absolutely massive. So anybody with a population of high-rise building that needs to inspect them, if they're not doing it already, they absolutely ought to look at how they could do that introduction. And we did some rough calculations for the housing sector based on some examples, and the savings, if it was a straight line extrapolation from our examples, would be 800 million a year in savings. 800 million a year. Yeah. Compared with renting other equipment and putting scaffolding up to do it. Now, it only impacts the inspection piece of it, because clearly today the drones can't do the repairs. But who knows tomorrow with robotic arms and what have you. But it does allow you to just selectively then use the higher cost machinery, because you know where you've got to go and repair. You don't have to scaffold the whole building. So the financial case needs more work, I guess, is what I'm saying, Andrew, in all of the industries, because the uses are fantastically broad across multiple industries.
Yeah, they are, and I know I spoke to a rope access company a few years back, and they explained when you're inspecting a wind turbine, the whole process that you have to go through to inspect the blades on those things, and it has to go into a bunny ear formation, and then the guys climb up, and then they go and inspect one blade, then they have to come back down again, turn the blade, go and do the inspection again, and all of this takes I can't remember the exact time, but it was something like 4 days or something to be able to complete. Whereas if you went to go and use a drone, you don't have any of the implications of putting any men at height or any staff at height. You don't need to keep on turning or anything like that, and it saves a huge amount of time and cost on that. And it's the funny thing is with this is it certainly from us being in the drone industry, we sit there and we look at it and go, well, it's kind of a no-brainer for a business to have a drone and for them to implement this into their business and so on. But I suppose the whole purpose of this discussion is to understand them. If that is the case, if there is such a huge benefit to using a drone, be it for, I don't know, search and rescue, for instance, the speed at which you're able to find a person with thermal imaging over, people walking along, or even furthermore, hiring out a helicopter that will cost you a fortune. So the big question, I suppose, is if if the drones are so great and they can provide all of these benefits, then why aren't they everywhere? Why isn't everyone using them? And I suppose we'll look at this initially from within the UK, and we can kind of branch out from that. But Burhan, from your perspective, what would you say? What's your kind of input on that and thoughts on it?
I do think there is some sort of financial barrier with it, because it's not like it's a cheap bit of kit. You are investing quite a lot of money into it. but eventually that does pay off. So I think people are scared to make that jump into the drone industry, and that's stopping them from doing that. I believe Graham could probably expand on that as he works with a lot of stakeholders himself.
Do you think, because it's something from working in the industry, it's something that I do hear quite a lot, certainly from people that maybe aren't as that don't have the full knowledge of the drone industry, is when you sit there and say, for a full piece of kit that maybe it'll cost you 20 or 30,000 pounds, and people's eyes go wide. But I think certainly from that side of things is people, when you actually look at the cost benefits, like Graham said there, if they've saved 800 million pounds and they had to spend 30k, 60k even. I mean, even if you spent 100k on that, it's still a worthwhile investment for sure. But that's a really good point, because I think there is this kind of like fear out there in terms of the costings for sure. I know, Rebecca, in terms of your dealings with customers, you probably hear all of the objections, and that's why your company exists, actually, because it's all about being able to go in there and try to take the sort of legwork out of it and the headache out of it for a business. So what's why aren't businesses using them? What are they scared of?
I wouldn't say that businesses are scared of using drones. I wouldn't say that that's the challenge or the objection. I think from a drone operating company, going to organisations, we're changing hearts and minds, and I think that's kind of the first obstacle that we have as an operating company. We also then look at what Graham touched upon in terms of the savings, the use cases. We are establishing on a day-to-day basis and exploring a new use case where drones can be used in organisations. So if you took a recent organisation that I was talking to, and we were talking to their security division in terms of utilising drone capability, that same organisation works in facilities management, say, for instance. So we're not just looking at one area of that organisation, we're looking at multifaceted segments of that organisation in terms of where they can use that drone capability. For us, when we go into a customer and an organisation and we talk to them about drones, we try to talk about the broader, the wide case uses. So, for instance, we've touched upon roof inspections, we've touched upon high-rise buildings, we touched upon wind turbines, then we can go into telecommunications. There's all different types of structures or assets that can be inspected from a drone capability point of view. So I think it's not necessarily a challenge, the challenge of the organisation that they don't want to embrace drone technology. I think it's actually understanding, when we look at the cost of investment into a drone proposition, is actually, where do I start? Okay, let's have a look at the legislation. That's a bit confusing in terms of, do I operate in open? Do I operate in specific? Do I operate in certified? It's about the organisation understanding that regard. And I refer back to the Skies Without Limits PwC report, because one of the key things that came out of that report was about procurement departments procuring drones. The legislation's changing, the technology's changing. There's no go-to place for any organisation apart from operating companies or drone service providers, and like RPAS out there talking about the benefits of drones. There's no go-to place for an organisation to say, how do I integrate drones into my workforce?
Do you think from that side of things, it's more of because it's a newer market? Obviously, we think that it's been around for years, but in terms of the actual commercial outlook and people's understanding of it, that a lot of people are only just really sort of hearing or looking to implement. So do you think that it's more of like an educational thing, like they're a bit scared, not scared, but they just don't quite know where to start? Like, I'm interested in it, but I don't know where to begin, basically.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. There's that apprehension from any organisation. It sits under a regulator at the end of the day. So that will always cause apprehension from any internal team looking to look at new technology, as one would say. But I think it is articulating the benefits as well of the return of investments, the cost savings. There's not a lot of case studies out there where we can share with organisations, as is pocketed across the board of our client base, and we utilise our own case studies internally. And it's something that we've touched on with RPAS, about those case studies, bringing those case studies to life, but equally it's the commercial operating companies that have got to offer that information so RPAS can put those case studies together and put those out into the sector. It is a huge education piece.
It certainly is, and it's a big task because my favourite saying is people don't know that they need drones. That's, and then when you go to them and you say, okay, so what are you doing currently? Oh, you're doing X, and how long does that take? And how many people does that take? And how much money does that cost? And can I come to your business and show you how to do it with a drone? And then 99% of the time you're going to go there and you're going to do it in a fraction of the time, fraction of the cost, with less risk. So it's more. I think we're getting there slowly. I think, Sergey, from your side, like what are your opinions in terms of why they're not sort of being implemented more in the marketplace?
Yeah, there are different factors, and Rebecca, please allow me to disagree with you here on the topic of the not enough use cases. From our point of view as a manufacturer and working with probably hundreds of different partners over the world, we see a lot of use cases. Actually, it's more of a problem how to spread that good knowledge about different use cases from, let's say, a country in Asia to the people in Europe or US, etc. So it's kind of a knowledge and experience sharing, which is definitely a problem, and we as a manufacturer try to bring all those new and exciting use cases on our enterprise website, so we can educate those people in these areas to learn from others around the globe. But there are also few other factors that I think are still playing a role in why drones are not everywhere. For sure, the public perception about drones, I still see fire chiefs or people in enterprise companies on a senior level, which thinks, yeah, well, drone is just a toy. My kids have it and they love to fly with it during our vacation, but what can I do? What we can do with that? And that goes again back to the point that we need more education and more good news to be spread around the world, and that would lead us to that point where people see, okay, an enterprise drone is completely different from my Mini 3 drone, which I'm taking always on my vacation, etc. The other factor is in the years in the past, we had some kind of a technological limitations which slowly getting solved. The first DJI drones had like 20 something minutes flight time. Nowadays a Mavic 3 Enterprise can fly for 45 minutes. And
just to add in that, the Mavic 3 is only a small drone as well. This isn't a huge bit of kit. This is something that you, don't get me wrong, it's probably a big pocket, but when folded up, you can actually put into your pocket. It's quite a small drone. So that flight time on something so small is quite impressive.
Yeah, that technological limitation, especially the flight time, was a stopper for a lot of organizations. And I think now with technology getting better and better, also the camera and also the range that the drone can fly. Of course, we go into the topic of BVLOS operations, but before.
Just for the people that don't know, in terms of BVLOS, what is BVLOS for those that are watching that don't know?
It's beyond visual line of sight operations. So you don't see the drone like line of sight, so it's beyond your vision.
So just to clarify for those that aren't in the drone industry or pilots, one of the rules essentially when you are flying a drone within the UK is you have to maintain visual line of sight, i.e. when you're flying the drone, you need to be able to see the drone in the air. So that's actually something that we'll discuss in a minute. There are limitations in terms of what people can do because they can't fly beyond visual line of sight, and certainly we'll come to that in a minute. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure. No, exactly. And nowadays the technology allows you to fly as much as with the latest technology from our side. You can fly as much as 20 kilometers, and that's astonishing. Like a few years ago, it was just like a few kilometers away. So that enables new use cases and the new use of drone technology. And maybe the last thing that is also important, cost was also a huge factor before, but with the technology being more and more adopted, etc., the cost is gradually going down. So nowadays you could have like a Mavic 3 Thermo for something around £5,000.
Or even the Enterprise. I mean, ex-VAT is like £2,500, something like that, which is super cheap for an investment for a business and with the capabilities of the drone.
And that's the whole drone. And just to compare, like 6-7 years ago, when we had the first Inspire with the first thermal camera, that just the camera was costing thousands of euros. So we were able to cut the cost more than half and enable more and more people to use those thermal imaging drones, so they do work. So by lowering the cost in that sense, we make it more attractive for those businesses to look into the drone topic and to start investing into it.
Good stuff. It's certainly, as we know, DJI are at the forefront of the drone industry, and certainly I think when we are talking about the pricing, and yes, there are a range of price points that people can come into the industry, but like you say, when you're bringing things in and a business can look at implementing a survey drone, for instance, for 2.5K ex-VAT, when you can get a good quality thermal imaging drone for 5K, thereabouts sterling, if we've got anyone coming from across the pond. So it's certainly, there's a number of things out there, and I think what we're looking at here, obviously, is there's bottlenecks from the side of the consumer or the businesses that are coming into these, and the concerns maybe that they have, maybe that it's a bit too complicated, or as my favourite one that always comes through is that the knowledge of the drone industry is they've heard of Gatwick. When the drone was there and it stopped planes and stuff, and then they hear about them appearing over football grounds and those kind of things. But certainly there are other things out there, certainly from I would imagine from a kind of legislative point of view that's limiting what people can actually do with this kit. And Graham, I think you're at the sort of front with that side of things. So in terms, what's preventing the usage of drones or drones being used more, do you think, out in the industry out there?
Well, I mean, I think I'd agree with what's being said. One of the things is, hey, the budget, there is no spare budget. So in order to get people to look at drones, you've got to displace something, or they've got to not spend something they're already doing. That, to me, is one of the challenges. That's why, although we've got use cases, we don't have business cases for drones. That includes saying, this is the amount you can save if you do X. This is how it works in with your workflow. There are a lot of cases where people have bought a drone, 2 or 3 things happen. One is they probably don't get it spec correctly. Second is they fly it and they deliver rubbish. So the data is unusable. And that is unfortunately still happening. And Rebecca could tell you how much time they spend trying to make sure that people who on paper look like they have the right credentials actually need to be filtered even further so that that they can deliver, a very good job. I think education in simple terms for businesses, this is what drones are, this is what they do, is something that we would love to, generate some videos on, just really focusing in on why businesses should, from a health and safety and a budget point of view, at least examine the use case for drones in order to look at what they could do. It is confusing. If they try to start an internal team without external help, quite a few of those will not deliver, and that puts us back quite a long way. So we do need more case studies. We need them, but we need them with the financials on the back. And we shouldn't underestimate the expertise that exists in existing operators that we need to try and leverage more, because it's not a case of, well, Burhan can probably tell you, it's not a case of just grabbing a drone, flying it and looking and inspecting a roof. I mean, that's not how it quite works. But that's the other impression that people sometimes get.
Sorry, Gary, I was going to say you have to do a lot of work beforehand before you even get to the site. You have to do a lot of pre-site assessments, and then when you get there, you have to do a site assessment, and just making
The
sure he's actually.
flying is, sorry, but the flying is, yeah, what, 10 to 20% of the
Yeah,
actual job. And it's a skill set. So one of the other things we've been trying to do is on that education is trying to work with industry bodies to educate their members, surveyors, civil engineers, local government. But boy, if ever there was a mountain to pick to climb, that's quite a big one. So, if anyone else has got any ideas, I think we're going to put how to contact us up at the end of the session. All ideas welcome, and together with any budget for videos, if anyone's got any.
I think that's a good point. I mean, there are certain industries that just seem to get drones. So, for instance, if you go to the survey industry, then there's a huge amount of drone usage within that sector, and they seem to, that they started off quite early, and the adoption's been great within that sector.
But
I think
still only a fraction, Andrew. Still, if you look at every
Oh yeah,
surveyor in the
it's still
UK,
tiny.
it's still a small fraction.
I mean, if you look at tier ones, for instance, and the size of these multi-billion entities, or multi-millions or whatever, and the amount of drones that they've actually got within their business, it's still tiny in comparison to what it really should be, and we're still working on that adoption. It just shows where we are, and I always kind of use the example that when like the iPhone came out, and if I remember right, we were probably still in sort of Nokia days, playing Snake and stuff. May have been some kind of more advanced ones, but even when that came out, you get the people that were like, "Oh, I've got to have it, and I've got to go and get the iPhone." But you still had those people a couple of years later that are still clinging on to that old phone. The people that are, I think there's probably still people using Nokias now. I mean, they're bulletproof, but it's that adoption. You get the early adopters, and then as time goes on, then the more aware people become of it, it works to be kind of like a Jones effect. And now, you look at the iPhone. I mean, everyone's got one, haven't they? Obviously, they've got a bit of Samsung as well. But it's and I feel that's where we are with the drone industry at the moment. Whilst we're plugging away every day to push it forward, and the adoption is increasing, it's still only a fraction of really where it should be. And certainly, I think the points that you've made there, Rebecca, with the sort of knowledge and people being educated more on that side of things, certainly the case studies and so on out there is a really good point. And it's just that it's a very difficult one, and it's like Graham says there, it's not an easy task. It's a big hill to climb, but it's kind of something that everyone in the industry needs to kind of club together with and get those use cases out there. And certainly, as I'm listening, we are a value-added distributor, so we deal with resellers throughout the UK and Ireland, and certainly that's something that I can take back to the market. And we're always talking about getting case studies out there, but it's more of a specific case study. It's not just, we had a problem, we used this drone and now the problem's solved. It's what specifically happened. Like, how much money did you save? How many staff, did you not need to use? Did you need to bring in scaffolding? No, I didn't need, and all of that, more specifics around it, so that people can become more educated, for sure. Do you think,
Andrew, if you allow me here to jump in on
yeah,
that,
go for it.
I think we also have a bit of a different problem, especially in those big organizations, where we have recently also working with a big energy company in Europe, and they have already seen the benefits of drones, and to use drones for inspections, which improves the safety, the return on investment, and everything. But when we came out to the point, well, how do you want to, because you have so many different colleagues around Europe and you want to spread that knowledge and to show them the return on investment while using drones. And I said, well, we cannot talk about that in specific numbers, because it would show us that if we don't adopt it now, we are actually losing so much money, and we cannot show that to our chiefs. So it was like it's kind of that protecting own employees or colleagues for not adopting new technology quickly enough. And because of that, well, we would not talk about the return on investment at the moment. Let's keep the safety topic as well, which is also huge. I mean, improving safety of employees is a huge topic, but it's not always enough, especially for the C-level in the big enterprises to say, okay, let's go full into that drone topic.
Well, it's certainly, that's a very good point. I think certainly it's great to say that we need more case studies and videos and those kind of things, but sometimes trying to get them can be quite difficult because people are sensitive. They don't want to necessarily show the customers that they're working with because other competitors may come in and so on. And then there's things internally as well. And it's certainly a really good point with that it can be quite difficult, but certainly the more that we push with it and we can try and get those things out. Know that DJI are very good at getting those things from around the world and getting those stories pushed out there. I suppose I'll put this to you, Sergey, because what we're talking about, because we're based in the UK, we're talking about our experience in the UK. But how do we compare in terms of drone adoption to places like, say, Europe, the US and so on? How do we compare in terms of our adoption? Because I've heard, like, you see places like Australia that seem a little bit more liberal with things and a little bit more accepting in terms of letting things through. What's your kind of take on where the UK sits within that side of things?
I think it would be more reasonable to speak more about Europe or the EU and comparing UK with the EU or other countries, because that's my region of competence. I can clearly say that, especially in the UK public safety market, which means police, firefighters, search and rescue, UK was definitely one of the leading players and started adopting drone technology back in 2014, 2015. That was the time when the first police organization started using the first Phantoms, attach an action cam to it and have a camera from the air. But we also saw that some other public safety entities, especially in the Nordics, which didn't start it so early, quickly realized the benefits of drones, and then they went full throttle in adopting drone technology to the whole police forces, and it was surpassing to a certain degree UK in the number of drones, pilots, and how the technology is utilized. And speaking about those, I think Sweden and the Swedish police was one of those players which started, I think it was 2018 or even 2019, and then they trained hundreds of drone pilots. I think the drone fleet has now more than 350 drones across the country, and they are, like, population-wise, they are much smaller country than the UK. However, they have one very big problem. That's it, that they have huge territory and only 9 manned helicopters. And that was one of the key reasons. Okay, we need to cut the cost because 1 hour of helicopter flight is around 3,000 euros. And for 1-2 hours, you could basically buy a drone and have it infinite for you, or at least for the next few years to use it. And also an interesting point was that they saw not only the return on investment with the drones, but also that the drone opens new possibilities how to use the camera from the air, basically being not so noisy, which is good for the population, but also allows them to touch on crimes which with a helicopter would not be possible to be seen from the distance. And basically that allowed them to show to their chiefs, hey, these are the benefits of using drones, let's go full scale. And one more point which was completely different from the UK, but that's kind of a regulatory thing, is that in the UK you have around, I think, 45 different police counties, and in Sweden you have one Swedish police authority. And that helped them a lot with the standardization, with the protocols, with training, with everything. Having one central body to manage the whole drone program, to sync between the people, but also share the good and the best practices with them, and ensure that the training is at the same level everywhere. So because the last thing that you want is that you have not enough trained pilots, which will do something which could stop the whole drone program. So that was something that the Swedish police did completely different, and that's why they are at the moment one of the leading forces in Europe.
I get that, and I think certainly in one of the things with when we're saying why aren't drones more sort of prevalent and everywhere, it's certainly within those sectors, shall we say, where there isn't just one, not one sort of decision maker, but one body essentially controlling it. And when it becomes a bit of a bag of cats because everyone's doing their own thing, so someone adopts something over here, but then they haven't quite got it, and so on. I think gradually within some of those sectors, like everyone is kind of getting there, but there's still people within, certainly within public safety, that maybe aren't using them quite as much. Whereas you've got others that are using drones a huge amount. And actually in the UK now we've got a program, what's it, Sky Coppers, I think it was called, which was West Mids Police or something, and how they're using them and how they're implementing them. But I think even that, I mean, if you turn the clock back to like 5 years and say, oh, like actually in 5 years' time you're going to have some mainstream television that's going to be showing DJI kit and people using drones. I mean, it is absolutely huge for the industry. I think so. When we're looking at this, because we've all heard, and for those that probably aren't the drone people necessarily, we were all promised that Amazon were going to be delivering our goods, and we were going to have our Deliveroo and stuff that are delivered to our door, and then we were going to have medical equipment that would be dropped in the motorways to people that are in need, and so on. And obviously that hasn't happened. So there's a reason why that hasn't happened, and we kind of touched a bit on that earlier on. And there are limitations out there that obviously the Civil Aviation Authority are there to as the kind of the governing body, and their job is to make sure that people are flying these drones correctly, and that people are safe and so on. And it's quite funny with this, because it seems that everyone's really scared of these drones flying around and scared of these things that are going up. But whilst what I can drive around in a 2-ton explosive that will travel at over 100 mile an hour, and you can go and do that, and you can drive that anywhere, and you can drive it in any city and everything, and it's fine. But when it comes to that little drone, you can't fly that everywhere. And we understand that there needs to be safety implications in terms of not being able to fly over people, because I mean, Christ, if one of these lands on someone, it's going to cause some damage. But do you think, in terms of the sort of legislation, is it too harsh? Is it bang on? Do they need to cut back? Do they need to do more with it? I suppose, Graham, obviously you're dealing with the sort of lobbying and so on. Like, what's your kind of take on that side of things? Because obviously the reason why drones aren't everywhere, one of the reasons is down to the laws and the legalities of that side of things. So what's your take on that side?
Well, I think we've got to get into slightly more detail. First, can I just go back on the police? There's a lot of activity now, and you're right, the 43 police forces, whatever, but there is now, I mean, I sit on one of the National Police Chiefs advisory groups, and there's both counter UAS and UAS teams now reporting into the police chiefs, trying to coordinate the activity for the UK. So I think there's a lot of progress there. And if you've watched that Channel 4 Sky Coppers program, actually it does sort of give a few glimpses into what they do. And I think we're only on episode 2. So I think that is, as you said, that's sort of quite a lot of change, and it's getting more consistent. There were a few lead police forces. Lincoln was quite advanced. Devon and Cornwall were quite, who had because of their larger territories and what have you, so maybe more similar to Sweden, they were pushing the envelope on some of that stuff. So all I'd like to say there is some great progress, and watch the TV show and then and see what you think. In terms of the regulation's remarkably consistent around the world. I think one of the big issues is how complicated it is to get different approvals, like operating safety cases and what have you. And I know, that there's a lot of criticism in various quarters. What I sort of say is I don't see RPAS as a lobbying group. We're more about trying to work with and make sure that regulation, the approvals shouldn't take 3 months, 2 months, whatever. They should be a lot quicker. And that is being worked on. Now, it's not simple, but there's a lot of progress.
So, Graham, sorry to interrupt. So when you're talking about approvals there, like for those that don't know what we're talking about here, what do you mean by approvals, and what's taking 3 months?
Okay, so if you want to be able to fly in certain areas, close to buildings and what have you, you need an explicit approval. So think about it as it's like the advanced driving or whatever. So, you get your driving test, you can drive a car. But if you want to do something separate or different, you need to go up that scale. It's sort of... and you need to make sure that you've got the knowledge, you can do the risk assessment, you can mitigate the risks, and that's effectively what an operational safety case is. But think about it where, I am writing saying, I want to do this, and here's how I'm going to mitigate the risk. That's like a longhand essay that someone's got to read, review. So those processes are going to be digitized, and so that they can be executed more quickly, more standard, and that will happen progressively. It started, months ago, and it's coming through. So some of the frustrations that operators feel, and I'm sure Bex has, got the scars on her back from trying to, get the operational safety case and what have you for iProserve done. Probably same with Burhan. So there's a lot of necessary paperwork, but probably overcomplicated. And we're going through something now on the remote pilot competency. How do we measure pilot competency? And that's something that, are we getting it quite right at the moment? No, it's in a consultative phase. But that's something that industry has been not critical, but wanting for some time. We work with an organization called the ECITB. So it's Engineering Construction Industry Training Board. It looks after a load of industries. Those industries get levied, and then they can spend the levy money back on approved training. And drone training has been included in that, but only recently. So it was all about pipe fitting and, other skills that you need in those industries. But now, and that the definition of that isn't a CAA level training, which there are two sort of types at the moment, one of which is GVC and the other is A2C of C. It's not at that level. It's industry saying this is what we need people to know flying in our industry.
That's some really good points there, Graham. And just for those watching, again, many will know, but in order to fly drones, certainly commercially, then you need to have a qualification, or people call it the license, the General Visual Line of Sight certificate, or for hobbyists, you can have the A2 certificate of competency. And again, I think those, in terms of the limitations or the things that stop people coming into the industry is the concern around that as well, like the what do I do, how do I go about it? And there are a number of facilities, and very good facilities up and down the country, that you can go to, and they will support you through all this process. I know with Burhan, you've recently completed your I believe you did both, didn't you? Wasn't the A2 CFC and the GVC as well? So in terms of people's concerns around how complicated these things are and so on, would you just give us a brief explanation of what it entailed and how difficult it was?
So yes, I did the A2 COC and the GVC. So the A2 COC is just a theory test. As Rebecca did mention earlier, all the legislation and regulation can be confusing, but the theory test is relatively easy to pass. I passed it first time. And then the GVC is both theory and practical. So the theory is a lot of the same stuff from the ATCOC, but builds up on top of that so you can fly in more populated areas. And then the practical is they get you to do a few maneuvers, a few safety incidents, and how to handle them. But I will say a spanner to throw in the works, so to say, it is very easy to pass these tests, I would say. That doesn't necessarily make someone competent to fly a drone. So it is crucial to have these regulations in place, but and to have levels to it, because I would say because of the safety features within the drone, that makes it a lot easier to fly them, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good pilot. So just touch up on what was mentioned, there needs to be a lot more education regarding drones, how to fly them, how to act safe, and as Graham mentioned, it's only 20% is flying the drone. A lot of the stuff is beforehand checking those are okay, and then when you even get to site, you have to make sure it's okay. So there's a lot that has to go into it, and I believe having the education there will make more people jump into it, because realistically, apart from drone resellers who supply like training courses and stuff, there's really not much education out there.
That's
Can I
very
just add?
interesting. Go on.
Sorry, Andrew. Can I just add to that I think there's an important point, because if you're looking at surveying, one of the continual battles or discussions online is what do you need to do to get the accuracy? How accurate can you get it? And I think a lot of that sort of centers around, well, how experienced are you? Do you know what you're doing? Every now and then you'll get a bad result, because you do when you're walking with the same equipment, doing it land based. But there is no the experience and knowing what you're doing is something that you don't learn in the A2 CFC GVC arena. And interestingly enough, the addition that the industry wanted to add to the ECITB stuff was 7 additional practical tests, because the practical testing is the only way of actually trying to check. It's like driving a car. I mean, I remember I thought I knew how to drive a car when I passed my test, but I spent the next 6 months looking at the gear stick when I needed to change it. And I think everybody does, because you've got to check where it is. And then it becomes second nature, and it's getting to that point, which is the important bit.
Yeah, of course, but I feel like with drones, there's a lot of regulations that stop you from actually being able to go out there and practice. Because it's not just you can just, same as in your car, you can just hop in it and go drive. With a drone, you can't do that. You have to check everything.
But there are places that you can go. I mean, local model flying clubs and what have you. Some, will welcome you. Some not so much. But there are places, or talking to a local farmer.
I think there's some really good points there, guys, and certainly in terms of like the learning to drive is the easiest comparison, I think, for everyone. I think if you spoke to my missus, she'd probably say I'm still learning to drive, but that's a different thing.
No, she means you're a bad driver, Andrew.
I don't think I am, but my alloys say different. But certainly, I think from that perspective and implementing it, and actually, I've got some experience of this, because just recently I've been working with a partner, and they are working with an end customer, and essentially they're looking to bring out pilots that they can go out and can go and provide surveying with. So they will be able to hire those pilots out. Now they're literally starting from scratch. So they've gone through to the training facility, of which they're a great training facility, very, very much so, and very capable. But they've come back after the qualification and said, well, we don't know how to survey. And I was like, well, the thing with the GVC is very similar to your driving test. It's a license. It's something to cover everyone, to make sure that you're safe enough to go out to fly, and you understand what you need to do and what you need to look out for in terms of the weather and those kind of things. But it's not something, you're not going to come out of that and then become a surveyor. You're not going to be able to produce a 2D 3D aerial map. You would then need further training. But I think the key thing with all of this is then that the commitment of the pilots as well, because Burhan knows you can go out and you can go and do your practical, but even prior to that, you need to get some flight hours in. You need to get used to flying that drone and how it maneuvers and those. And don't get me wrong, they're very, very simple. They're if anyone's a gamer out there, I mean, it's not that much difference from picking up a PlayStation or Xbox controller to be able to do these things. But you still need to be able to control it. And the point that Graham's making there, it's still going to take time for you to become a drone pilot and a capable drone pilot. And again, this is, I think, one of the sort of stoppers out there, and certainly one of the things that we need to, as an industry, work together on in trying to close that gap for people, which I know that you, Rebecca, are doing. And it's more about, if people are uncertain about something, the more that we can take that uncertainty and try to sort of take them under our wing and show them that it's not that difficult, and do some of the legwork for them in terms of getting that in there, then more people are going to implement that. And when we're probably 5 years, maybe even a decade away from now, all of this is going to be irrelevant, because probably everyone's going to have them, and we're going to have them flying everywhere over our heads and hopefully delivering things. But in the meantime, we've got to push up that kind of uphill battle, as Graham says there. So I think, in terms of the points that you've kind of covered there, guys, it's a number of things. There's an uncertainty from the end, from the businesses out there around the education and what they need to do, how they're going to implement it. There are perceived cost implications to bringing drones into the business. There are legislative and legal bottlenecks, perhaps, around being able to fly them. So, in your opinion, what do you think can be done, going UK specific, what do you think can be done, obviously within businesses holding the hand a little bit like I've just covered there, but what can be done to kind of close that gap and get drones being used a bit more? Is there anything that we can do from, to help businesses, Rebecca, you think, to be able to close that gap a little bit and make it easier for them to actually bring drones and a drone team into their business?
Personally, I think it just boils down to that education approach from a collaborative drone sector. So collaborating with RPAS, for example, touching on those applications, but more importantly, what that ROI is in terms of the return of investment to that organisation. And it just sometimes, it doesn't boil down to cost, like we've talked about. It talks about efficiency and health and safety. I think collaboratively as an industry, it is that education piece. Birmingham, you've touched upon in terms of the training from the CAA's point of view. We're a recognised assessment entity ourselves, iPreserve, so we understand those categories in terms of operations, looking at the syllabus. Obviously, Graham, you're working with ECITB, enhancing the sector as well, and doing that educational piece from a drone operator's point of view. The qualifications to entry, and that is basically an entry qualification from the CAA, is very basic. And then it is about the environments in terms of which we're operating from a drone operating perspective. So I think it's about everybody collaborating together, helping educate in the sector as well, to promote positive use from a drone perspective.
And there's some really, really good stuff there, and it's certainly, it's about positivity, and I think people are gradually getting there, but it's obviously it's just baby steps essentially in moving it forward. Do you think, Graham, from the legislative side of things, you're saying there, obviously, in terms of applications for special operations license and those kind of things, those are a bit slower. Do you think, in terms of where people are able to fly and those kind of things, is there anything that you think can be done from a CAA perspective, or anything else out there in order to sort of loosen things up a little bit, to make it easier for people to use and adopt drones in their business?
I'm not sure that people want things loosened up, to to pick on the wording there, Andrew, I think the length of time it takes to process some of the paperwork is the major frustration, and the communication channels, which we know that is being worked on. And if anything, we want to be sort of more precise with what people are allowed to do in the higher level categories, i.e. when you do want to get closer to buildings and people and what have you, because you don't, it would be really bad news if there were accidents. But we do need greater definition of some of those things, which is we've got within RPAS just over 20 people in what we call the regulatory special interest group, who are the team that we go to when there are changes proposed or what have you, to get their views on what needs to be said back to the CAA, trying to work with them to improve the situations. And likewise, we sit on a number of groups where both the CAA, DFT are there, because the DFT is setting the longer term ambition and statement of direction. So in the last few years, we've been involved at sort of ministerial level on some of those committees, which drones were never part of that community. It was all airlines and so there are changes, and there was a comment made the other day, which is, that's very interesting because more departments are asking us about drones. So that's, there is more attention on drones. Now, some of it totally misguided. So that education piece is an absolute must because, as you said, people talk about Gatwick, still not proven there was a drone there. The recent scare, there definitely wasn't a drone there. So, we do need to keep that communication going. And I think that there have been a number of studies where people say, oh, the public don't like drones. Well, actually, their perception of drones, once they've had some education, the dial swings right across. So, it proves that we have got to educate them on the use cases and what have you, and improve our communication and use social media and keep it simple. We can't keep using aviation language to try to talk to both industries who aren't in aviation and the public. But I think we'll find future flight. There's 17 future flight projects going on at the moment in the UK, and every one of those has a public engagement work package. In other words, they're engaging and telling the local public about their projects and how drones are being used. They also, quite a few of them, involve the local government for the area that they're either flying in or that's going to be impacted. So I think that those all finish in about June next year. So after that, it will be interesting to see what public perception is like. And then the other thing that we're trying to do more of is to work with different industry groups, institutes, trade associations to educate their populations as well. And then lastly, creating some education and STEM aimed at industry on the one hand, but also aimed at schools, colleges, scout groups, through videos, so that they all go home and say how exciting drones are.
I certainly think that. I think in same like people saying that people don't like drones. I think it's quite the opposite. I think when you get a drone out, and it doesn't matter if it's a little Mini 3 or a massive M300, immediately it causes it gets everyone's attention, and everyone talks about how good it is. And it's certainly, I think a lot of the time, certainly within business out there, when you put when you go to demonstrate a bit of kit to someone and demonstrate a drone, a lot of the time I think the owner probably just wants the drone because it's cool more than anything, and immediately they see it, they just want one because of having one of these things. They're just they're very impressive bits of kit. I think we've probably, or people have probably heard of, like we said, about the beyond visual line of sight, and certainly there are rumours of this drone highway that will go into throughout the UK. We know that there are drones that are being flown over to the Isle of Wight and so on for medical uses. We know over in places like Africa, for instance, they're using fixed wings and doing a number of flights to deliver medical equipment over there, because obviously it's a huge expanse of land. Sergey, do you think, is there anything that they're doing over in Europe that you think that we could implement here, to make things a bit better, or to get drones used a bit more by business? Is there anything they're doing really well over there that maybe we could learn from?
Well, sure. I mean, something which I think it's quite not very popular in the UK, especially also in the public safety industries, using drones for photogrammetry. What we have seen here in Germany is that, and it's quite well welcomed also by the courts, by the judges, is to use drones after a car accident. And instead of just taking few pictures with your phone whatsoever, then they usually have a Mavic 3E. Back then also, like previous versions of Mavics, but now using Mavic 3E with an RTK module, so they can create a fully 2D or 3D model of that car accident in just a couple of minutes, which allows them, and that's the good part, which allows them to clear everything, especially on a highway where it's super important to be as quick as possible, to clear everything and still have the evidence. And on top of that, you have a digital evidence. So you can reconstruct everything after you're in the back office. And the exceptional part is you could then show that 3D model in the court, so it could be understood by everybody what happened, how it happened. You could rotate it from any side, and then it's super easy and cheap to do. And that's something what I would say German police is quite advanced into it, but also the Nordics as a learning from that. I haven't seen that quite well adopted in the UK as of today. So I think that certainly UK police can learn from using those 3D models. And additionally, something which complements what Graham said about what the industry should do to keep forward. One thing we always advise our customers and partners is to share their stories, to connect with others from the industry, and that was also one of the arguments why the Nordics and the Nordic police is so advanced, because Sweden, Norway, and Finland, they are working so closely, and they have often meetings between the different police forces to learn from each other, to share best practices. And that's something we always advise, not only public safety customers, but also enterprise customers. Of course, there's also competition, so you would not be happy to share all of your best practices with your competition. But maybe in the energy sector, where everything is per country, we would advise those customers to speak with others, to join those associations, to engage in those work groups, and to learn from each other.
So some great points there, and again, the being able to learn from each other and have best practices and so on. I think from the public safety or public sector, it may well work on that front. Certainly in terms of business, then if someone's got a competitive advantage over someone, then they're going to want to obviously keep that. But again, this does come down to industry associations and so on, looking at these kind of things and pushing these forwards. Obviously, our passion is pushing the drone industry forward, but every industry within the UK has an association now, and a number of varying different members, and it's time really for people to start looking at this and taking it very seriously. We know the world that we live in now. We know that it's called the cost of living crisis and the crisis and everything. We know that people are becoming unemployed and businesses are looking at the bottom line. So I think as well that the benefit to that, because obviously every cloud has a silver lining, is more businesses than maybe were teetering on the edge of looking at drones, maybe now are being forced to. because they're sitting there and they are looking at it as a cost-saving exercise. But there's still a number of people out there that don't know that it's going to save that money for them. And hopefully, so there are some watching this out there that do realise and do want to feel out and find out more information, which, there is. And again, when we're talking about the sort of limitations and why drones aren't everywhere, I think for someone coming in for the first time, there's a huge amount of information out there, and it's just a case of how you filter through it and what's right, what's wrong, what do I need to do, what don't I need to do. And it's about going to the correct professionals out there to get the correct advice and guidance. And there are people out there like Rebecca, like Graham, that can certainly provide all of that information. I think in terms of where we're at, we've covered a hell of a lot of points there so far. I think in terms of the discussion we've had, we pretty much covered everything. I think. Is there anything that anyone feels that they would like to add to the conversation so far? Is there anything that's maybe any points that maybe we've missed, or any questions maybe I haven't asked that you feel are poignant in terms of the why drones aren't being used everywhere, and anything that maybe we could do or anything like that?
So I think it would be good to talk about what safety concerns people have and what we can do to ease their mind, so to say. I think that'd be a good question for Rebecca because she's very customer facing.
Okay, so questions that I get from our clients predominantly, and I think in all respect, we predominantly use DJI drones. So where can you fly and where can't you fly? So can you fly over prisons, say, for instance? Well, that's safeguarded by DJI from a DJI restriction zone. So we have to go for permissions to get approvals to do those types of flights. So I think that's a predominant one in terms of where can you and can't fly, airports, prisons, highly sensitive sites. That's covered around the safety functions from DJI's point of view. You've got the inbuilt safety features from collision avoidance, etc., for accidents. It's a very stable platform, hence why predominantly most of our operations are done with DJI drones. But then we look at the different weights and categories from the regulator's point of view, so they're addressing it. So the lighter crafts are less risk from a safety point of view. So that falls into the different categories from a legislation point of view also. Finally, you've got the data privacy, but equally from an ICO point of view, they do give guidance. Drones fall under the CCTV, so limit in terms of recording, protect your site in terms of signage, high-vis vests, that type of thing, also from a privacy point of view, and don't record unnecessarily.
Can I add to that? Yeah, I mean, I think safety is important, and the regulations are there, and two main areas for that sort of that view of the world. One is the air risk, and clearly one group of people we haven't talked about are the other air users, of which general aviation has a lot of sport and leisure users, and then also commercial users, executive jets, cargo planes, and what have you. And for a lot of that, the topic we haven't touched on is the whole airspace modernization and integration of everything in airspace. And that is something that won't be cracked quickly. For a lot of people who want to use drones to do inspection, they're not in an area where there is air risk because they're either close to a building or they're close to a wind farm, or and in general, other planes shouldn't be in the area. So the fact that we need to make sure that all of the regulation is proportionate, that people can get on with doing the job but not increase risk to other users is important. And I don't think overall the direction we're heading, we're not doing a bad job of that in the UK. And there is a lot of tracking of other international what's going on in international, and I don't think we do too badly. The main piece is we've got to get it right, because if we are successful in getting a lot more people to use drones, there'll be more of them about, and we don't want them crashing into each other or into buildings or into people. So it's not a simple topic, but that shouldn't stop businesses trying to get the financial and safety and green benefits out of using drones.
So in essence, really what we're looking at here is that maybe drones aren't everywhere, but we are moving in the right direction. It's still only it's still in its early stages, but we are moving. Yeah, everything's moving in the right way. Realistically, what we need to do, certainly from an end user perspective or a business case, is to help them understand what the benefits are of using this kit. So is it, in terms of the financial side of things, making it a bit easier for them to understand the legislation and the qualifications and those things, and just really getting more use cases out there, so that people can actually see how drones are being used, where they're being used. And we've touched on a few areas today, and we've missed many more. So there are things like oil and gas. I've heard of people using them within the waste industry because they need to see where the waste is heating up, and they therefore they move it to prevent fires and things like that. So there are very weird and wonderful ways. The Blue Planet, for instance, used it to catch whale snot. So it's, these are the eccentric ways of using it, but there are going to be many other ways that we can do that in the future. Certainly from the legislative side of things, it just needs to become a little bit more seamless, I suppose, and a little bit quicker. But as with any kind of governmental organisation, things do take time, and the processes within this, I think it's still early in that side of things for people understanding what drones are being used for, and as they're becoming more prevalent, they're realising that they're needing to change and put these processes in place, and therefore, maybe they are going to be a bit slower. And like you're saying, it's taken a few months to get an application through, but again, that's being flagged, and hopefully we can get that shrunk down. So overall, it's positive for the drone market. I think we all thoroughly enjoy the market that we work in. It's certainly on the forefront of tech, and we've only just sort of scratched the surface really on what the technology can do and where it's going to go. Unless anyone does anyone have any other sort of points that they would like to add in there, or anything that you feel that that we've missed or that you'd like to add?
Okay, I was just going to say that if anybody wants any background reading, there are quite a few studies from the likes of PwC, one that Rebecca mentioned earlier. McKinsey have done one, Deloitte's have done one, Frost and Sullivan have done some. These are all looking at different aspects of the drone industry and looking into the future. And I think what we've primarily focused on today is what we can do today. But tomorrow's sort of uses, to me, are totally fascinating, crossing agriculture and all sorts of other industries. And when we get to the point where we add robotics on, I mean, Israel were experimenting with a drone that picked apples. I mean, with a little robotic arm. When we add robotic arms, it's just going to be sort of so exciting. And lastly, you see, I think that will inspire young people to want to get into this industry and into aviation. So I think it's something we should try to communicate as well.
For sure, and I think when we're, for people to understand out there the capabilities in terms of the thermal imaging, because a lot of times people just think, oh, it's search and rescue and I can just go and find someone. But in terms of thermal inspections on buildings, machinery and those things, just generally in terms of for inspections as well, the amount of time that it saves with power lines, where they used to have to do it with helicopters and spend thousands of pounds getting those power lines inspected, they're now using drones, and it's a fraction of the cost and time, and so much easier. I think one of the other things as well to point out is there are different kind of handbooks and things that people can look into. So I know that with DJI, for instance, there was the Architecture, Engineering, Construction handbook, and there's a number of other handbooks that you can find on the Enterprise website, along with case studies as well on DJI Insights, and I can't remember the name of the other tab on there, but there's a lot of bits on there. And certainly from the AEC handbook, It literally walks you through from start to finish of how to implement drones into your business, what the pitfalls, what the bottlenecks are going to be, what the stakeholders are possibly looking at, and this whole thing. So there is definitely help out there. Are there any other places, guys, that you, and I'm putting this as open to the floor, are there any other places that you can recommend if people are interested in implementing drones into their business? Is there anywhere that they can go and sort of pick up some information and any guidance to a place that we can send them to?
RPAS.
RPAS, yes, the RPAS website.
Yeah, I mean, we take inquiries from people wanting to, start a drone business, or how do I do this, or how do I do that, and we're sort of impartial on that. We don't sell stuff. We just really look at trying to develop the market. So, if and typically we would try putting them in touch with someone who's already doing whatever it is they're trying to do, and take them on from there.
Well, I think I think anyone watching will have gained a benefit from this discussion. There's been a lot of very good points that everyone's covered today, and thank you all for your attendance, your input, and your time. I know you're all very busy people, so we are very grateful for you being here. Also, thank you for everyone that's registered to actually watch this webinar. We are going to include links, referral links to further information, to things like RPAS and DJI Insights and the things that have been discussed in here, and any other bits that we can find that we believe are going to be of help. We will also email through Q&A to you, as I mentioned at the beginning, as well as a link to this particular video as well. So thank you once again to all of our panelists. Thank you to everyone that has registered and attended to actually watch this. Hope you've enjoyed everything, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.